church. It's good to be with y'all again. So this morning we looked at adultery and Jesus' teachings on it in the New Testament. But tonight I wanted to look at God and His example. And one of the interesting things we may not often think about is adultery has been a key theme throughout the whole rest of the Bible. And God Himself gave a divorce to people. Did you know that? It's a very interesting passage. We're going to look at that, and we're going to explore that a little bit, because some people have never really seen this, but God gave someone a divorce, and we'll see that in a moment here. But we're going to explore the principle of those who have sinned and left God, and how He views them. And this is going to teach us some important principles. One is how God views His covenant with us. And second, how He views those who have left Him. And what that relationship looks like, what that means for those people. So we're going to take our first example, or we're going to start this in Jeremiah chapter 3. And we're going to start in verse 1. And we're going to read through this. So there's going to be some important things. So I'm going to read, we'll stop for a moment, and I'll give a little bit of insight, and then we'll keep moving on. Because there's a couple of historical things here that we need to know. A couple of things of context, or we might get a little lost. So Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah takes place in the 600s BC, before Christ. And the people of Israel have been unfaithful. And we're going to later look at Hosea, but Hosea happens before Jeremiah, but I thought it was beneficial to look at it the opposite way. But Jeremiah receives these words from God to speak to the people during the reign of Josiah. And he was a good king of Judah. Israel has at this point kind of been, well, they've been wiped out. They've been taken off the map. And we'll see that in a moment. And then Jeremiah serves under other kings all the way to the captivity into Babylon. And this is important backstory, important historical contexting, so that we can look at this and see what the people of Judah are doing and know why God's about to say these things to the people and what examples He's going to use. So, Jeremiah chapter 3, starting in verse 1, it says this, a saying, "Look, if a man divorces his wife, and she goes from him, and she becomes another man's wife, will he return to her again? Will not that land be greatly defiled? And you have prostituted yourself with many lovers. Will you now return to me, declares Yahweh?" So, at this point in time, again, the people of Judah have abandoned God. They have gone after other idols. They have left Him. And He considers it prostitution to other lovers. That's His view on this. And He says, He hasn't divorced Judah yet, but He says, look, this is the law in Deuteronomy chapter 24. If a man was to divorce his wife and they were to get remarried, they couldn't after a time, like let's say his wife that he remarried dies, they couldn't become remarried. And there was some reasons for this, but in the old law in Deuteronomy, that was the thing. A man who divorced his wife couldn't remarry her after she'd married another. So God's bringing that up in this conversation. He's saying, look, this is what a divorce looks like, and this is what's coming for you, because you have prostituted yourself with many lovers. And He's saying, now you're trying to return to me? And so this whole context, they understand this from the law, and they see this in their history. So Jeremiah is trying to wake them up. This is still early on in his ministry to them, but there's more. So we continue on into verse 2. "Lift up your eyes at the barren heights, and see where you have not been ravished. Besides the road you sat for them like an Arab in the desert, and you have defiled the land with your fornication and with your wickedness. Therefore rain showers have been withheld, and the spring rain has not come. Yet you have the forehead of a woman prostitute. You refuse to be ashamed. Have you not now just called me my father? You are a close friend of my youth. Will He be angry forever? Will He maintain it always? Look, you have spoken, but you have done all the evil that you could." So, at the end of this section, this first little section here is talking to Judah. Judah has abandoned him, and they're like, oh, God won't be angry with us forever. They've recognized some of the signs that have come forth. He's withheld rain, saying, hey, come back to me, because what you're doing is not good. I'm preventing some things from happening in your life so that you might open your eyes to the evil that is going on. But the people in Judah just kept saying, oh, he won't be angry with us. They ignored Jeremiah. They imprisoned him later on. They beat him up. They do a ton of horrible stuff to him. But he keeps speaking to them. He keeps warning them, and they keep ignoring it. And God's bringing that out here. And he's saying, look, I'm going to be angry with you because you continue to do evil, and you've done all the evil that you possibly could. They're living just as the people around them. They're sacrificing their children to idols. They're living horrible lives that is dangerous and hurtful to those around them. And it's hurtful to God. They've left him. So now he's going to use a case study. The case study of Israel. And this is where we're going to see a divorce happen. God's going to divorce Israel. So let's read that. Starting in verse 6. Then Yahweh said to me in the days of Josiah the king, have you seen what apostate Israel has done? She has gone on every high hill and under every leafy tree, and she has prostituted herself there. And I thought, after her doing all these things to me, she will return. But she did not return. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it. And I saw that for this very reason, that on account of apostate Israel committing adultery, I divorced her and gave the letter of divorce to her. Yet her treacherous sister Judah was not afraid, and she went and prostituted herself also. And it was because of the frivolity of her fornication that she defiled the land and committed adultery with the stone and with the tree. Yet even in all of this, her treacherous sister Judah did not return to me with all her heart, but only in pretense, declares Yahweh. There was a time in Jeremiah's ministry where the people kind of woke up. They said, oh, we're sorry. We saw what you did to Israel. You took her into captivity, and Israel is going to disappear. She'll never return. Judah later does after the 70 years, but Israel's gone. She's been given a certificate of divorce, and they never come back. They never recover from that. But Judah sees this, and they start to repent, but they don't really continue down that path. They're like, oh, we're sorry, and then they go right back to doing the evil that they've done. And so that's why he says, but only in pretense has Judah returned to me. But he's going to continue on in verse 11. Then Yahweh said to me, apostate Israel has proven herself more upright than treacherous Judah. Go and proclaim these words to the north and say, return, apostate Israel, declares Yahweh. I will not cause my anger to fall on you, for I am loyal, declares Yahweh. I will not be angry forever. Only acknowledge your guilt that against Yahweh your God you have rebelled, and you have scattered your ways to the strangers under every leafy tree, and you have not obeyed my voice, declares Yahweh. Return, apostate children, declares Yahweh, for I am your master, and I will take you one from a city and two from a clan, and I will bring you to Zion. Then I will give you shepherds after my own heart, and they will feed your knowledge and insight. And it will be when you have multiplied and become fruitful in the land those days, declares Yahweh, that they will no longer say the ark of the covenant of Yahweh. And it will not come to mind, nor will they remember it, nor will they miss it, nor will it be made again. At that time they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh, and all the nations will be gathered to it. The name of Yahweh to Jerusalem, and they will no longer go after the stubbornness of their evil heart. In those days the house of Judah will walk with the house of Israel, and they will come together from the land of the north and the land that I gave as inheritance to your ancestors. There's some important and a little bit challenging things here. When he starts to say Israel here, you have to kind of see the history as a whole. And so the Israelites, when they're reading this, they tap into it really well because they understood what was happening. But for us, it could be slightly hard. They know Israel's gone. They know they've been decimated. They've been scattered. And actually, Israel is so scattered that that's where we get the Samaritans and others from. And they never return to the promised land. They marry and intermarry and get dispersed all throughout. Judah stays together in Babylon and will return. So when he switches here, when he starts to say Israel, this Israel here is not the Israel we may be thinking of as the one united nation, or even the separate nation that split off in these days. It's talking of us, actually. Notice he says, the Ark of the Covenant will be not remade, nor will it be remembered no more. This is one of the few messianic prophecies in Jeremiah. There's not very many, but this is one of them. He's speaking to the days of when our covenant will stand. He's connecting this saying, we're looking far into the future. All of this apostasy and perversion and prostitution has happened, and you have been dismissed, or you've been divorced from me, Israel, but that's not the end, because I'm a forgiving God. I will give a new covenant, and there will become a new Israel that will be one with Judah, and that will be from the land of the north, which is often associated with, if you follow the land of the north, that is pagans, and that is us. We become Israel with Judah through the new covenant. And so it's got a lot of imagery, a lot of meaning, and takes a little bit of study. But that's some historical stuff here to help us see this. And God's bringing his people back to him. He wants this covenant with them. But when they're living in sin, they must be separate. And sin has completely destroyed the Israel of their time. And so notice when they broke covenant and they abandoned God for idols, he relates this to prostitution. He relates it to a wife taking another lover and many other lovers. And he says, I have all grounds for divorce with you, Judah, but I haven't yet. I'm not going to cast you out like I did then. And this imagery will continue on throughout Jeremiah and the other prophets. God uses it a lot, and he constantly refers back to Israel. And one of the biggest examples of this is the example of Hosea. Now, Hosea is before Israel is sent away. Before Israel is destroyed. Hosea happens about 70 years before Jeremiah takes place. Though their ministries at the end, kind of, the kings get close, but they're not quite overlapping. But Hosea's ministry begins about 70 years before Jeremiah's, from what I've seen in studies. And so I want to read Hosea to get another picture of this, because we get some other important things, I think, here of this image of God being a husband to those he's covenanted in. And this is important for us because there's a lot of marriage imagery within our covenant today, and we'll see that in a moment. But we're going to read through a little bit of Hosea's story. So starting in Hosea chapter 1, in verse 1, we'll start reading. And this is what it says in Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. The word of Yahweh came to Hosea, son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, the kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. At the beginning, when Yahweh spoke through Hosea, Yahweh said to Hosea, Go and take for yourself a wife and children of whoredom, because the land commits great whoredom, forsaking Yahweh. So he went and took Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And Yahweh said to him, Name him Jezreel, because in a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. Notice here this first child. It has a specific name, and God's saying, look, the house of Israel is no longer going to be. This is a warning to them. In Jeremiah, they've already passed. They've already gone. But here he's issuing the warning. He's saying, I'm going to put an end to them because they have been a prostitute to me. They've left me. They've abandoned me. But he continues on in verse 5. On that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. The significance of this name comes into play later on. You can track that throughout the history. And then in verse 6 he says, He conceived again and bore a daughter, and he said to him, Name her Lo-Ruhamah. For I will no longer have pity on the house of Israel or forgive them. For I will have pity on the house of Judah, and I will save them by Yahweh their God, and will not deliver them by bow, sword, war, horses, or horsemen. And when she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. So this next one, again, it's going into the history that we've already seen. The house of Israel is not going to be forgiven them. There's not going to be pity on them. They're going to be taken away and destroyed. But on the house of Judah, he will have pity. He will save them because Yahweh is their God. And this is part of the covenant promise he made to David, that your Your people will live, your line will live, and you will always have a king on the throne before me. And we'll see that come into fruition later on into the New Testament. But continuing on in verse 9, and he said, name him Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. The number of children of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, and that cannot be measured or counted. And in the place where it is said to them, you are not my people, it will be said to them, children of the living God. And the children of Judah and Israel will be gathered together, and they will appoint themselves one head, and they will take possession of the land, for great is the day of Jezreel. Now again, this uses somewhat confusing language, because they just continue on using Israel. But Israel changes in verse 10, because Israel has no pity. They're forgiven. They're not forgiven. They're destroyed up in verse 6. But in verse 10, the number of children of Israel will be like the sand of the sea and can't be counted. It's because Israel has become us. Because we have become the Israel that was destroyed. Because we were not his people, but we are now called children of the living God. This again is another thing that points towards the Messianic prophecy. And that'll be brought out actually in the New Testament, where it says, you were once not my people, but now you are my people. And again, so we see this coming through. We see the history here of Israel that leads to us in the history of Judah. But here, more importantly, or not more importantly, but an aspect I want to focus on, we find the beginning of the story of Hosea's life. It is such an interesting and fascinating story here, the book of Hosea. I would highly recommend studying it because we can't cover it all. But he's commanded to take a wife who he knew was going to be unfaithful. And he has kids with her. And over this time, and I was reading a book, and they had a very interesting perspective. This wasn't a short amount of time. He went and found this prostitute, and he begins a relationship with her. And she seems to go on the straight and narrow for a while. They get married, they have kids. This is years of time together, faithful. Or so Hosea thinks. This is displayed in the story at the beginning as these are Hosea's children. But you find out in chapter 2 that these aren't Hosea's children. She had been having affairs with other people and having children from them. And God uses all of this as symbolism with Israel and himself and the way they had treated him. And yet he's so patient with Israel and with Judah because they treat him the same way. I want to read another little section of text in Hosea just to get one final look at this before we close. In Hosea chapter 3, we're going to start in verse 1. Hosea chapter 3 says this, and Yahweh said to me again, go love a woman who has a lover and is committing adultery, just like the love of Yahweh for the children of Israel. But they are turning to other gods and love raisin cakes. So I have bought her for 15 shekels of silver and an omer of barley and a measure of wine. And I said to her, you must remain as mine for many days, and you will not play the whore. You will not belong to a man, and I will belong to you. The children of Israel will remain for many days without a king and prince, without sacrifice and stone pillar, ephod, and teraphim. And afterward the children of Israel will return and seek Yahweh their God and David their king. And they will come in fear to Yahweh and to his goodness at the end of days. Again, this is a prophecy, and it's a prophecy of us. David's dead. And the people who come back to their God, Jesus, is going to be their king. Jesus is the line of David. David is often used as imagery as Jesus throughout the Bible, and you can see that in other prophecies. And so, again, we're brought in through this love of God. We see redemption talked about here. This Israel that has completely left and abandoned God. They have done things that would be horrible to do to a husband. God views himself as Israel's husband, and today in our covenant, he views us as the husband of the church. The church is called the bride of Christ. Even though the people abandoned him and took other lovers, he says, I'm going to buy them back. They will be mine. He wants a relationship with them. And so what he did for us, because our sin separates us from him, he sent his son to earth. He became human, and he walked among us. He struggled with us. He lived life as we did, because he wanted everyone to be saved. He wanted a close relationship with them. But furthermore, he then bought us. He bought us through his death, through being tortured to death. The cost of his blood and sweat and tears, he did that for us. That was our cost. That's what he paid for us, just as Hosea paid for the woman who had left him. And God desires that restoration of relationship with us. He desires to have a marriage with us. That closeness of being, as we talked about this morning, two becoming one. One where there's total vulnerability and complete knowledge of the other. This is the relation God desires to have with his people. He will fight and pay for his people, and he did. And so today, as we're closing, I want us to remember that God displays all of these principles. He views marriage in a very serious manner, and he views him being married to us. He wants us, he desires us. He wants none to be lost. He wants none to die, none to perish, all to be in relationship with him and blessed. If you're struggling in your walk with God and you need help, then let someone know, so that we can support you in your relationship with God. It's a hard and long journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And we all need people sometimes to be our pace partners who run with us. If you need to enter into the beautiful covenant that we've been given through the blood of Jesus, through baptism, then let someone know, or come forward as we stand and sing.